Hello lovely people. Today we're going to start working with some subwoofers. We're not only going to have a look at the subwoofers, but we're going to do some testing as well. So in this video, we're going to review these two subwoofers, which is ESX VXP series, a 10-inch and an 8-inch. Both of them are shallow mount. We're going to have a look at those, how they look like, what the specs are. And then what I want to focus in this video is comparing a smaller subwoofer, which is an 8-inch, against a bigger one, which is a 10-inch. Because a lot of times people online ask, what is the difference between a smaller and a bigger subwoofer? Now, unfortunately, this series VXP is only 8 and a 10. They do not have a 12-inch. If we would have one, we could compare it as well. But I think the results can be scalable, but we will see what we're going to find out. A lot of people again say that smaller subwoofers such as 8-inch or even 6.5, they're going to be much more punchier, more transient, much faster, if you want to say that. And a bigger one, because it's bigger moving mass, bigger cone and everything, is going to be slower and not as precise. We're going to see, because I'm planning to measure the impulse response and we can directly compare. Now, from previous measurements, if you saw my front subwoofer testing video, we saw that some subwoofers do indeed have a better impulse response. So we will see with these. Now, in regards to these two subwoofers, you can see the packaging is slightly different, because this one, I believe it's a newer version and it's a dual coil. So it's an 8-inch, 2 times 2 ohms. So we can wire it down to 1 ohm or up to 4 ohms. This one is 1004, which is a 10-inch, a single 4 ohm coil. In regards to the specs, well, they are shallow, and to be honest, they look very, very good. Actually, let's have a look how they look like. We do have quite high surround. The cone itself, you can see it looks kind of similar to the Alpine shallow mount that I have, and this is glass fiber sandwich. The cone itself, it's quite thick, and I will be able to show you on this one. Yes, focus. You can see it's kind of a honeycomb structure. It looks like almost like a cardboard, and it is thick, similar to the stereo integrity, but it does have this ridge that reinforces the cone. Because when you have a shallow mount subwoofer or any kind of driver, you cannot use a typical cone, the cone shape, which reinforces itself. That's why with these flat cones, you need to be kind of creative. It is considered to be a high-end subwoofer because it is quite expensive. In the UK, this 10-inch costs £344, I think. This one is, I'm not sure, because I found only Euro price, which is like, I think 320 or 350 euros. So they are quite expensive subwoofers. They're premium. And in the future video as well, we will have a look at this one, which is a premium 8-inch versus the recoil, which costs probably 4 times less. And we'll see what is the difference between a cheap 8-inch subwoofer and an expensive one. At the same time, with a 10-inch, I'm going to show you the box as well that I made. We will be testing quite a lot of different 10-inch subwoofers. It's just for now, I want to do these to get them out of the way, and then we're going to focus on other stuff. So one thing that was slightly concerned to me about this smaller 8-inch subwoofer, like this 10-inch, it does have not a lot of space, but it does have space. If you use 18mm MDF or whatever, you still have some space. But with this 8-inch subwoofer, you can see there's very, very little space. You see how much space does it have to breathe like this? Very, very little. So I am a little bit concerned that if you use a slightly thicker baffle, this might restrict the airflow a little bit, unless you would chamfer the inside edge just to allow some more airflow. Now, these subwoofers, due to their design, they do have gaps over here, which is way behind the baffle, but these gaps are coming from under the spider. So this is basically to cool the voice coil and the pole vent as well. But this is just very tiny gaps, so you have to be very careful with the installation not to choke it. I think the 10-inch is going to be fine. It's just the 8-inch, due to the design, it's very small. Now, it is a beefy driver, like it is heavy. For an 8-inch, it's very heavy. This one as well, you can see the mounting depth is very shallow. In regards to the specs, the power handling, the smaller one is 300 watts, the bigger one is 400 watts. Both of them do have 12 millimeters of X-Max, so for an 8-inch, I think is great, especially for that kind of shallow mount. 10-inch, 12 millimeters is kind of average, it's okay. The only difference is the shallow depth of mounting. Now, the shallow mount construction comes with a compromise. The compromise is that both of them do have slightly more moving mass than a typical driver of the same diameter. If you would have a paper cone, aluminum cone, whatever, that is going to be lighter than this, so they try to minimize it using these kind of specialized materials. But still, it is a big cone, it is a sandwich construction, so the moving mass will be a bit higher, and it's going to be very interesting to compare, for example, this one with a higher moving mass with the other, for example, the Dayton one that I have, the 10-inch, which has slightly smaller moving mass. Now, the basket on both cast aluminum, we do have this ESX. It looks very nice. Like, the looks of this driver is extremely nice. It's just a shame that it's gonna go into the box and you cannot see it. The cone itself, it looks nice as well, something a little bit different. So visually and spec wise, they do look cool. They're very nice. Now, are they worth the extra price tag of 350, 300 pounds? I don't know. We're gonna see. We're gonna compare them. Now, in regards to the testing, let me show you what I have here. I do have this rig because I want to make a separate rig just to test all the subwoofers, because I don't want to touch anything that's in there. So for testing, we will be using a lithium battery connected directly to this Alpine monoblock that does more power than we need, and feeding it, we will have SMSL DAC with no crossovers, no nothing, because we'll be testing full range output. It's going to go directly from the DAC into the amplifier, USB into the laptop, so we will have the cleanest possible signal. Not that it matters for subwoofers, but like THD of this is like 0.005, which is ridiculously low. That's why I want to use this and not the recoil, because recoil is 0.2, 0.3%. It's good for daily, but not for reference level when we need to do the testing. Now, these enclosures, I will talk about this enclosure later on. This is my test enclosure that will fit other 10, 11-inch subwoofers, and this is the one for the 8-inch. So for this one, we have 32 liters inside, which is a bit more than 1 cubic foot. And for the 10-inch, the recommended box size is up to 32 liters, so it's going to be perfect. This one is 15 liters. Again, for the 8-inch, I think the maximum box volume is 16 liters. So again, it's on the bigger side, but it's still within spec according to the manual. Now, I will test these subwoofers in this corner as all the other ones. However, do not compare these measurements with the ones that I did previously from this location, just because of the sound treatment and deadening that I already did. Because I think the sound treatment will affect slightly the measurements, and it's going to be very interesting to compare if I will... Yeah, I'm going to find a subwoofer that I measured before. The measurements will be taken from the driver's seat. As always, I will put this one, the smaller box, in the footwell because I can fit it. I cannot fit this big one, so because I want to see how it would perform as a front sub. 15 liters is like 0.5 cubic foot. You can fit it in the footwell, and if you're gonna have enough output from that single 8-inch, it would be a great front subwoofer, I think. One thing that I forgot to mention, that the smaller one, the newer one, A22, comes with the grill, and this grill is amazing, very high quality. This is a metal, probably aluminum or steel ring. You have ESX on the actual grill. Looks very nice. And another thing that I forgot to mention as well, I'm gonna put a little bit of filling, not much, probably very loosely filled, maybe like 150 grams and 100 grams in this one, just to have a little bit of it, because from a previous testing that I did, the conclusion was that filling helps to reduce the distortion for some reason, I don't know. And another thing is, both of these drivers are brand new, and I broke them in before doing this measurement. Yesterday I ran probably an hour for each driver, close to FS, close to X-Max, so they are fully broken in. As always, want to show you how everything is connected. Lithium into the amplifier, amplifier into the subwoofer. Signal is from the laptop over there into SMSL into that one. Microphone is in the driver's seat, unique too. I did bolt this box to the frame like it's supposed to be. I'm gonna bolt that one as well. I did remove this parcel shelf because sometimes it's a bit rattly, especially on these ones, just to make sure that nothing extra rattles. I'm gonna sit in the back and I'm gonna do the measurements. Okay, let's start with the modeling. We have the 8-inch in green color and the 10-inch in blue color. In regards to the enclosure, I put the small one in 15 liters and the big one in 30 liters, exactly what we have. Now we have 0.9 QTC for the big one, and for the smaller one, 0.6, so below 707, the ideal one. Now, if we give both of these drivers some power, 300 watts for the 8-inch and 400 watts for the 10-inch, and we're going to have a look at the cone excursion, we can see that the 8-inch has 12 millimeters. It's kind of okay down to 40, and then the excursion goes over X max. So it would need either a slightly smaller box, let's say 8 liters, it goes down, or 10, yeah, 10 liters, ideal. Or it would need an infrasonic filter just to bring down this excursion. With a 10-inch, the situation is the same. 30-liter box is slightly too big for it. To manage the excursion, yeah, we need to go into 20-liter box. However, we have it in slightly bigger. So what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the power down to like 300. So yeah, 1 millimeter above X max, it's fine. And then if we're going to go to the SPL tab, we can see that under these conditions, in these enclosures, and with that amount of power, the 10-inch will be 4 to 4.5 dB louder than the 8-inch. And this is exactly what you expect just because of the cone area. Now, after this basic modeling, let's have a look at the impedance graph. We have both of these drivers in free air. So the 8-inch has an FS of 43. The FS in the manual is 36, so probably it could loosen up a little bit more, but I did break it in, so yeah. The 10-inch has an FS of 33, and in the manual is just 31, so 2 hertz. It's very similar. We can say that this is broken in. The 8-inch, not sure. Maybe it's just a discrepancy between the manual and the sample that I got. When you put this driver 8-inch in the box, we have this. There's no issues, no resonances, you can say, nothing. The FB rises up to 54 hertz, which is expected. And we do have one blip in the impedance graph at 474, which is way outside of what the subwoofer is playing. It's something to do with the subwoofer itself because it's present in both free air and in the box. Exactly the same situation we have with a 10-inch driver. Put it in the box, the FB goes up to 45, and everything is exactly the same. And this very similar blip in the impedance graph is slightly lower frequency. So my guess is going to be the surround, because bigger surround will resonate at a lower frequency compared to a smaller surround that resonates at a higher frequency. In regards to the inductance, it's very similar. The 8-inch, I think, has a little bit of high inductance because this goes a little bit steeper. With this one, I'm trying to figure out where to start, and I think we're going to start with the front subwoofer application. So for the front subwoofer, I tested only the smaller 8-inch driver. I didn't manage to cram the 10-inch in the massive box. The response, if you remember, this is from the previous measurements where I measured the Alpine shallow mount 10-inch, the Dayton RSS, and the stereo integrity. So the ESX measures like this, the green line. It is a bit flatter than all the other ones. It does have a little bit more low end, and it does have a little bit more top end. Now, this could be because all of the other subwoofers, they sat a bit deeper into the footwell, and this enclosure that I did is a bit thicker, so it's not exactly the same place, so probably it's not directly comparable. But if we're gonna have a look at the Helix 8-inch subwoofer, we can see that the response is very similar, especially at the top end. It's just this ESX 81 has much more low end. So In regards to the response, this is the target. This would work as a front subwoofer like magic. As long as you have enough output for it, it will work as a front subwoofer. Another thing, very quickly gonna check the impulse of this one. This is the ESX 8-inch and it is closest to the Dayton. They're very similar. Now, the stereo integrity has a longer impulse, Alpine has a much longer impulse, and the Helix driver has probably a little bit shorter or the same. So the impulse, the most similar is with the Dayton. Again, heavy cone, even if the driver side is slightly different, cone weights, MMS does influence stuff. In regards to the distortion, we have the Alpine, as you remember, Dayton, stereo integrity, and this ESX. So this ESX, it has almost the lowest distortion from all of them, which is surprising. Obviously, the level is not that high. We're playing them at, what, 90, 95 decibels, so kind of mid-level. And yeah, the distortion, like, below 90 hertz, kind of the same or higher than the others. But above 90, where smaller drivers really shine, it does have a much lower distortion, which is very great to see. And now let's go to the 8 versus 10, the stuff that we actually want to see. One thing you're going to notice is this dip at about 62. This is not the driver, not the box. This is my cabin. This is a cancellation in the car that every car kind of has it. Now, depending on where you align these measurements, the green one is the 10-inch and the red one is the 8-inch. So we can say that either the 8-inch plays higher on higher frequencies, or if we're gonna misalign stuff, for example, like this, if I'm gonna pull that trace down, we can say that bigger driver will play lower. And this is exactly what I said when I did the video with Justin's measurements when he sent me 8s, 10s, and 12s. My findings were exactly the same, that bigger drivers will play lower. However, I did choose to align them in this region before the cancellation, in this lower region between 20 and 60, because if we're going to be using it in the back as a subwoofer, we want to see how everything compares in this region. So we're not gonna pay much attention above 60 hertz because this will be crossed out with a crossover anyway, and the most important stuff is here. And in that regard, both of these subwoofers measure identical. One is in, what I said, 15 liters or something. The other one is 32. So double the enclosure size, but the frequency response is literally identical. The only difference is in the higher frequencies. If we compare just these two measurements, and we're gonna have a look at distortion, THD. So again, the green one is the 10-inch, the bigger one, and the red one is the smaller one. And again, as expected, as I mentioned, we're not gonna look much above 60. This doesn't really matter. What matters is this. And here we have a big difference between the red and the green trace. What we can see is that the smaller driver, the 8-inch, even if it has the same level, same frequency response, it will have higher distortion. Now, the difference is between 0.5% and 1.5%, so 3 times. Obviously, it's not going to be audible, but the difference is measurable. So again, bigger driver will have lower distortion, even if the frequency response is identical. If we're going to compare the impulse of 10-inch versus 8-inch, I don't want to say there's a huge difference. Maybe because everything is in the back, and when the driver is closer, maybe you will be able to see bigger differences, but I want to say there's no difference. So my guess, both of these drivers would sound like impact-wise, they would sound identical. Now, I will try to listen to them as much as I can, but I think that I won't be able to hear any difference between them. Now, I did quite a few different measurements that might be very interesting. First of all, what I did, I took the 10-inch and I did measure it at different levels. So I was increasing the level by 5 decibels, up, and up. And I found an interesting thing. So if we have a look at, as I mentioned, again, below 60 hertz, actually we can zoom in a little bit, 20 to 400. What we can see, if I'm going to remove this one, All of these measurements are the same. Like if you would overlay them one on top of each other, they would be identical. There is slight difference in here, about 35 hertz. However, the last measurement on the highest power level, you can see that it's flattening out and it's not the same as the other ones. And this is what happens when the driver is reaching X max. So we can see that on the distortion graph as well, and we can see in the frequency response. And this is what we call non-linear behavior. Everything like here below 112 dB, everything works in linear fashion. If you try to push that driver harder, the change is not linear. And obviously, you have increase in distortion. And this is basically the limits of this driver output-wise. So I think I was measuring with a UMIC 2, so it should be calibrated. And we do have about 112 decibels kind of maximum output before the distortion massively kicks in. So again, a 10-inch for my purpose is not enough because I'm listening on much louder levels. My front end has to be 110 plus another 20-25 dB extra on the bass. So obviously a single 10-inch like that would not suffice for me, but for a normal person, that would tune the house curve a bit flatter and would have maybe just 10 dB extra bass rise. This 112 plus 100 dB on the front end would be perfectly fine and perfectly enough. Now, when we see this, and I mentioned the distortion, we can actually have a look at the distortion as well. So we're starting low. This is the same 10-inch playing on lower levels. Again, we're going to concentrate below 60 in this area. Now, if we increase the level, obviously distortion increases and goes up. Then increase the level more, distortion increases again. Then when you push it, for some reason, we have a massive bump at 37 hertz. This is a massive bump in distortion. And this, my guess, driver is just going out of X max. But overall, like below 60 hertz, all of this you can see level increasing, increasing, increasing. And the highest level where we see the frequency response flatten, we have this. We have 26% distortion. So even this, if we're going to have a look at the second measurement, measurement number 4, which has 10% distortion, which is this one, you kind of can see that this one is much flatter than any of these. So it does kind of start to compress already. And yeah, I think it's very interesting to see what happens when you push the driver too much. And basically, this is a tip for you as well. If you do a sweep, you can kind of guess your maximum output of kind of any driver. When you see when the distortion shoots up, that means that you're pushing that driver too hard. Now, if we're gonna have a look at the lower levels, like all of these, we can see that this driver doesn't have any problems with distortion on lower levels at all. Even playing below 30, the distortion rises only like up to 2%, which is not audible at all. Again, this peak, ignore it because this is a cancellation in the car and it's nonsense and it's not accurate. It's not 5% distortion just because like at 62 hertz, you can see here, there's no level because of the cancellation. Like here, between 28 and 55, everything is below 1%, which is very, very cool. Let's have a look at the same with a smaller 8-inch driver. This is lowest level, higher, 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 and higher. Now, on the higher levels, what I did, like above 100 dB, see, I have two measurements, one from 10 and the other one from 30 hertz, because I did notice that you really shouldn't play an 8-inch driver below 30 hertz. So then I started to measure only from 30 hertz. We can see that everything like above 60, the increase is exactly the same on all. So I didn't want to push this driver up to X max because it is a very small driver and I really don't want to damage it by accident. In regards to the distortion of this driver, we have lower level, higher level, higher level, and the highest level. And again, below 60 hertz, yeah, on the higher level, this 8-inch, again, has a bit more distortion. It's up to 2%, whereas on the lower levels, everything is, yeah, kind of hovering around 1%. But again, the 10-inch is a bit cleaner in the lower frequencies. Another thing that I did, and I'm planning to do this from now on when I'm going to be testing subwoofers and any other drivers, is I took RTA of a single sine tone, so 30 hertz, 40 hertz, and 50 hertz. I took the measurements on the same level for both drivers. So this is the 10-inch, and you can see the harmonics. If there would be any harmonics, it would be 60, 90, and 120. For some reason, it's 29 hertz. It doesn't matter. So we have harmonics probably here, here, and the other ones you cannot see them because they're too low in level. So this is the 10-inch. The 8-inch we can see is the same. There is a slight difference like here, but look, this level is 87 and 35 is like 50 decibels down. So there's no difference between these. If we have a look at the 40 hertz, 10-inch and 8-inch, we can say they're very similar. This one has a slightly higher harmonic, but almost the same. And 50 hertz, 10-inch and 8-inch, yeah, 8-inch plays 50 hertz a bit cleaner. It has a lower second harmonic, but a higher third harmonic. Okay, so let's summarize this. 8-inch versus 10-inch. Which one you choose and for what reasons? If you think that a smaller driver is going to be punchier just because of the lighter cone or whatever, it's not the case. The punchiness comes from the frequency response, and because compared small and bigger driver, the smaller driver will play higher, it will have more energy in the upper bass, like 60, 70, 80 hertz, and that's why it sounds punchier if you do not use EQ and you do not use any target curves. If you EQ them to the target curve, they will sound identical. So what are the differences? It's output and distortion. If we have the same frequency response, playing both of these drivers at the same volume, at the same level, the smaller driver will have more distortion. Kind of makes sense. If we push both of these drivers, the bigger driver will have more output. Again, kind of makes sense. So which one do you choose? It depends on your personal taste and it depends on your personal circumstances. Like the size of the boxes, the difference in size of the boxes is huge. Basically half the volume. If you don't have space, probably you're going to choose a smaller driver. If you have space, I always say go with the bigger one. Now the 8-inch is going to be a perfect driver for your front subwoofer. If you're gonna put it in there, half a cubic foot, you can give it less space, 0.3, probably 0.2 cubic foot, because you don't need it to play low, and it's gonna have plenty of output in a smaller enclosure. And yeah, I like these. So the 8-inch is mine because somebody sent it to me to keep it, and the 10-inch is gonna go back to the sender because it's not mine. So in this case, I'm not gonna play with the 10-inch because I don't want to damage it by accident, because you know I have more than 1,000 watts here. I am used to bigger subwoofers. Like the Alpine shallow mount that I have, which has probably double the output than this one has, is barely enough for me, so I'm not gonna even try this. I'm gonna save it for a bit later because in the upcoming videos, as I mentioned, we will do cheap 8-inch versus expensive 8-inch, and we will do loads of other 10-inch subwoofers tested. I'm just waiting for the Helix to show up because it's a bit late. Anyway, that's it for now. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.